Right, I think we're at 12. We've got a couple more people joining, but I'll just start. I'm keen to make sure you guys have enough time to present today. So, hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We've got a really good session planned with Surrey and Borders Partnership, who are one of our mental health trusts. I'm Jess from the communications team at TPP, and I'll just be giving a brief intro and then handing over to Surrey and Borders. So today's session is actually the first in a series that we're planning over the next couple of months, just to demonstrate some of the really great work that some of our users are doing with System 1 across a variety of care settings. So today we've got an example from a mental health trust, but we've also got GP examples, community and acute lined up. So as you'll see from the title of today's session, we've called it a Clinical Development Kit Masterclass. And that's because our umbrella term for all of the configurability tools within System 1 is the Clinical Development Kit. You guys, because of being clinical users, will be used to using templates, questionnaires, etc. in your day-to-day lives. And actually within System 1, you can build and configure your own questionnaires, templates, protocols, visualizations that are unique to your service and tailored to your needs. That's all already inbuilt into System 1, so it's available to all of our users already, regardless of the care setting they're working in. I'm going to be popping some more resources and information on that into the chat, but as you will see, today's presentation of Surrey and Borders is going to be on our visualization solution, so they'll explain a little bit more about that. Also, I'll be putting my email address into the chat for any questions we don't have time to get around to today. And also, if you have any more questions about the session itself or for Surrey and Borders, please do direct them that way. Also, after today's session, if you see this and think, oh, my team have actually created some really great content and we'd be interested to share the work that we've been doing, please do get in touch with me, because we'd be more than happy to look into maybe you doing a presentation like today's or a case study, whatever works for you. So please do send a message to me at the end of the session. So a few housekeeping bits as well. Can I ask everyone keeps their microphones off throughout the session, and if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat and hopefully we'll have a bit of time at the end to get around to some questions. Myself and my colleague Simon, who's a product specialist at TPP, will be monitoring the questions and keeping track of them, so hopefully we'll get around to as many as possible at the end. Yeah, I think that's everything from me, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass over to Nitesh, I believe.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you very much. It is a real pleasure to be here representing Surrey and Borders Partnership NHS Foundation Trust in this Clinical Development Kit Masterclass on innovative designs using visualization feature within System 1. I would like to thank all for taking time out from your busy schedule to be with us today. I would also like to thank TPP for arranging this event and giving us the opportunity to showcase some of the fantastic products we have been deploying recently. As Jessica mentioned, I am Nitesh Bali, and I work in the Digital Directorate at Surrey and Borders as Head of Design and EPR Development. I will be moderating today on behalf of SABB, and I'm also one of the speakers. We are joined by two more colleagues of mine who are the fellow speakers. And I would like to invite them to introduce themselves. So can I please invite Doug Stewart to introduce himself, please?
Hi, everybody. I'm a little distracted. My cat has just knocked over 3 plant pots behind my monitor. So I'm trying to put on a good poker face here, but I'm internally quite cross with him. My name is Doug Stewart. I am a nurse by background, but I'm also Chief Clinical Information Officer at Surrey and Borders.
Thank you, Doug. Next, I would like to invite Thomas Bradshaw to introduce himself, please.
Hello, everyone. Thomas Bradshaw, Clinical Pathways Product Manager for one of the design teams at SABP.
Thank you, Thomas. We thought to put together a short agenda for today, and We have split that into 3 components. So we'll start by talking about who we are at Surrey and Borders. And our first speaker would be Doug Stewart, followed by a brief introduction to design teams. As Thomas mentioned, he's one of the clinical pathways product manager in one of the design teams. So we thought it's important to share what these design teams are and what kind of processes we follow, what kind of tools we use, which helps us create innovative designs in System 1, followed by a comprehensive session lasting around 30 minutes where Thomas is going to walk us through the Clinical Development Kit Masterclass, specifically focusing on the visualization feature within System 1 and what we have been able to create using this feature and functionality. We have also booked some time towards the end of the session for question and answers. So without further delay, I would like to invite our first speaker, Doug Stewart, please.
Thanks, Nitesh. Hi, everybody. So it says our principles and values, but I think it would be helpful if you allow me to just lead into this by giving you a bit of our history, which I think is relevant. So briefly, as part of the National Programme for IT, we, like a lot of mental health trusts, moved from being an almost exclusively paper-based organisation to using our first electronic health record. But we fell into a trap that many experience of mostly using the EHR to digitise paper. Everything that was previously a template or a questionnaire on a bit of A4 was now represented in pixel form, and instead of being able to just pick up a pen and scribble some notes, we put in barriers. You had logins, you had smart cards, and then you had a minefield to navigate to just get to that bit that you needed to tap into. And we didn't much care for that. So after 5 years, after we worked through the national programme and the opportunity came up to use another electronic health record, we jumped at it because partly in our mind, it must be the tech that's wrong. And something new and shiny will solve all our ills. And we moved to System 1, and we've been using System 1 now for about 6 years. The thing is, just as we'd never gone from paper to an electronic record before, we'd never gone from one electronic record to another. So we fell into another trap. And the design of System 1, we made it look like the design of our previous electronic health record, which mirrored the design of paper, which we've been using for decades. So we really didn't optimize and the utility, if you like, of what electronic health records can do. But it's probably worth mentioning also a couple of home truths at this point. There is no oven-ready electronic health record that is going to be all things to all people. And I think that's important to recognize now. The complexities and the variability of services provided in health and care means you're just not going to get a one-size-fit. Not only across trusts, I mean, our neighbouring mental health trusts at face value provide very similar services, but the complexities and the geographies mean that there is actually significant variability where one design won't fit all, but not just at that macro level. Internally, our teams within our own organisation operate quite differently. And so again, it's worth recognising that you're not going to get something straight off the bat. We were one of the early adopters in using System 1 for mental health, and remembering that this was historically a system designed for GPs, coupled with how badly we implemented it initially, it was a bag of nails. We were no further forward from our previous EHR, and we risked significantly losing the hearts and minds of our clinical and operational workforce. And I guess the second home truth here is that there are, or there certainly weren't, any oven-ready experts in making electronic health records work. Implementing an EHR is still, or was typically a major IT project, and often the pace of deployment and other pressures mean stuff like user acceptance testing gets trimmed to a couple of shoehorned late evenings, offering people overtime just to get something over the line. And that doesn't really represent the usability and the need of your broadest workforce. So we recognised in Surrey and Borders that we needed to invest in our people, not only through raising their own digital maturity and literacy through programs such as the Digital Health Academy, but by putting a stake in the ground about our principles as a digital directorate. And what this meant is we set upon a journey to write a strategy. It was a brave move at the time, it was a couple of years ago now. And this meant we engaged with hundreds of our clinical and operational staff that previously weren't as engaged with either of our onboarding of EXRs. And it was important then to put a stake in the ground and try and shift the narrative where the design of the EXR was previously something that was done within your IT directorate behind a curtain. It was about technology, to one where we had to understand the user need more. And to do this, we need to start to truly engage with people. And we're still on this journey, it's by no means perfect. We've started to do some fantastic things in some small areas. We need to do it more at scale, but this really formed the basis of our digital strategy. And then taking this process, we've got a director of digital transformation, a visionary called Mike Covey, who brought in the concept of design teams into our trust. And that led to, this helped underline these principles, but that led to bringing in wonderful people like Nitesh and Thomas, who are now working in a way that isn't typical for the NHS. We've got NHS design principles, we've got really good ambitions, we often use terms like co-design, but the reality of that is the pace of change means it's quite often an afterthought. So we flip that narrative and we've put that at the front of engagement, we've put that at the front of trying to understand need. So before I take up any more time getting in the way of showing you the nice stuff that we've done, it's my absolute privilege to hand over to Nitesh and Thomas so you can see the fruits of this labour. And I hope you enjoy the presentation today.
Thank you very much, Doug. That was really helpful. I would actually like to talk a little bit about the design teams today. As Doug mentioned that Mike Covey is a visionary in our trust and he introduced the concept of design teams. So what does that actually mean? Because the design teams are the engine who are driving the innovation within System 1 software at our trust, Surrey and Borders. We are at the design teams, which is part of the digital directorate, a very diverse group of people who work together, and they've got multiple skills. They advocate and implement best design practices. So when Doug mentioned we are doing things slightly differently from what was happening in the past. So we are implementing best design principles and practices. We are following NHS design principles and guidelines. We collaborated with NHSX a couple of years ago and did an end-to-end project to help learn and upskill our teams as well. The idea is really to optimize the clinical workflows and pathways through just the right amount of digital interventions. Not everything can be solved through technology. In terms of the structure, we have 4 design teams at the present time within our trust, and they are aligned to different work streams or business areas. So as you can see on this map, bottom left, we have got a team which is aligned to service changes and core EPR development, electronic patient record development. We've got another team which looks specifically at the flow and inpatient improvement work. We've got Team C, which looks at children and young people services, and they're called Mindwork Surrey team. And they also cater to early intervention, help and support. Team D is looking at digital aspirant program, which is not just about multiple unit structure, but also open data architecture going forward. The nuts and bolts for each of these design teams which drive the innovation in System 1 looks like the map on the right-hand side. So we typically have a Scrum format here. So we've got a product manager who owns the backlog and are responsible for the product vision in collaboration with the development team and the roadmap. Then we have a Scrum Master who supports the product manager. They act as a servant leader. And they wear several hats. The main idea is for the Scrum Master to protect the time and development team from outside influences so that the team can specifically concentrate on work at hand. And then the development team is made up of profiles such as UX design and research specialists who are supported by designers and researchers. And depending upon the complexity or scope of the project, we are also able to tap into some additional resources such as service designers and content designers. Recently, we inducted a System 1 configuration lead to work on a huge piece of program within System 1. And we also tap into quality assurance and testing resources depending upon the needs and requirements. So we thought it's important to just illustrate the structure we are following at Surrey and Borders, just as an inspiration in case this helps you today. So what do? So we tend to humanize the digital interventions and move away from the technical jargon. We design products which are people-centric, specifically focusing on the need of the people instead of just ramping up a design and imposing it on the service or our stakeholders and clinicians. So we are very conscious about human-centered approach. The way we do it is by operationalizing the problem and introducing just the right amount of digital interventions. The idea is to further enhance the clinical pathways and introduce efficiencies in the process. So for example, Doug mentioned that we have migrated a lot of our services from analog media like pen and paper or Excel spreadsheets to a more reliable, safe, robust digital media or format. And the electronic patient record software we use in our trust is System 1. The design team are specifically aligned with electronic patient record software program to optimize and innovate. And the future vision is to open up that domain so that the design team can act as a support for the entire trust and not just limited to the electronic patient record software package. We are able to achieve these objectives through a scientific approach. It's very simple, but very robust. It has worked really, really well for us. And the equation looks like applied user-centered design process. So we mapped out the design team processes before we could do so for other projects and services. And combining that with an agile mindset, because NHS is very complex, there are changing goalposts, and applying Scrum and Kanban frameworks specifically for embedding the user-centered design approach has helped us in hugely in creating designs and product innovations. And this map at the bottom of the page, most of you will be familiar with it. We follow a typical product development life cycle here, starting with scoping. So just trying to understand before we start working on a project, why are we doing what we are doing? That helps us feed into creating a vision and roadmap, followed by a comprehensive discovery or research, which feeds into the conceptual design, or we call it alpha or prototyping, which is a co-design activity with our stakeholders. And once the future state is certain, we are certain about the to-be maps, we initiate the product development, followed by deployment and launch, and obviously the governance and learning and adoption, training part of the process. But I really want to highlight point number 6 here, which is the post-launch evaluation. Often people would release or deploy a product, but they wouldn't evaluate it in the future. Now, post-launch evaluation help us inform product increments and further optimize the product. So what does all of this mean? All of this has really helped us move from where we were. So on the left-hand side here, you're able to see the vanilla system 1 artifact, typical template. So the overall impact on the design within system 1 has been phenomenal. You know, we used to develop similar artifacts for several years before we were able to introduce these design teams and new ways of working, where we embedded user-centered approach and co-design. Now, the challenge with this vanilla version is that there are two main constraints. One is the constraint which is inherent within the software. So things like fonts and typeface and icons and color options and customization limitations. But the second problem with this interface here is the constraints for the development person. So the workflows are not optimized. The user experience is really minimal and basic, which means the one of the challenges we had originally was a single point of failure and low adoption of these products. What we have been able to do through implementing these new processes is to be able to flip these constraints and able to create something which is absolutely revolutionary. And most of the design elements you're able to see. So again, this is an example of a template or visualization within System 1, but it is built from scratch. We overlaid the System 1 functionality on top. So it's not really just about the design elements alone. We did extensive research and co-design this product with our stakeholders. The workflow is optimized and flows logically. This template actually delivers excellent user experience as a feedback of our users using this template. Non-clinical teams or admin staff find this extremely user-friendly. And this template is accessible. For example, it's autism friendly. You know, we made some color adjustments there. So let's pause for a second there to reflect on these insights. And again, I would like to invite Doug in case, Doug, you have anything to add to what I've said just now.
So it's probably worth mentioning that Class did some recent research, a survey of the national usability, I guess, of organizations' electronic health records. And we don't do very well in this country. It doesn't matter what electronic record you're using. None of them, and that's what I said earlier on, are out of the box, brilliant for all. Just from our experience, being able to shift and deliver the capability of reducing administrative burden, fewer buttons to click, can't overstate how important that is, making it user-friendly, so I don't have to navigate ream upon ream of clinical trees and branches and goodness knows what else. The product on the right is System 1. It's the same product, yeah? And this means a lot to people who are wanting to get in, record what they need to record, and get out. It's user-friendly. It's designed around their clinical workflows. It's designed around their operational need. It is not the system leading the design. So I think that's worth highlighting there.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. So let's look at how we ended up developing this and do a little bit of a show and tell and a bit of training with our next speaker, who's Thomas Bradshaw. Thomas, over to you, please.
Thank you, Nitesh. 1 second, let me just share my screen. Okay, there we go. So quickly, apologies if you hear in the background any children screaming. I live next to a school and it is playtime, so they're all out in force. What I'm going to do today, I'm going to take you through a couple of the visualizations which we put together. First one will be for a Bernardo service and another one for Malta and Griffiths kind of nursing assessment. So to give a bigger background for the Bernardo service. So this is a partner agency as part of our MindWorks pathway. Essentially, they required a simple interface to record calls from parents and children, kind of like an advice and guidance bit of software, and they also needed to be able to review patient records at the same time and any kind of important information. So this service, they hadn't used a proper EPR before. And when we were looking at System 1, we knew that they didn't need to go into the amount of detail which System 1 can go to, which is when we came up with the idea of a visualization such as this. So they only have exactly what they need to select and what they need to view for information to make it nice and simple. So you saw that I just opened up the dashboard by a button on the toolbar. And from this point, if I was one of the Bernardo staff members, I would not need to navigate away from this screen because everything that they need can be accessed from this point. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through the major functions that we put in place, but I'm not going to go through kind of registering and recording a referral, but I'll show you that it can be done quite simply. So I've got a patient here that I've just opened through the quick patient search, and we can see in the background that the person is open, so I can always refer back to who I'm actually entering data on. I can then record and view the referral if I need to. Obviously, I'm not going to do that, but you can see it's the exact same way that you would normally do it on your normal System 1 patient record screen. And using the views, you can discharge them as well from this point. What that means is that we can have their entire process, their entire patient pathway on this screen. So on the rest of the screen, we can also see major functions which they would need to enter information into. So I'm going to start off with the script. Obviously, because it's an advice and guidance service, they might need some assistance with any kind of questions. And we actually used another visualization embedded in this visualization, copying an image onto here to be able to show this in a very readable format for them. We also have links to templates. So every single person that would call up this service, they would have a assessment. And as you can see here, as well as on the Bernardo's visualization, we've also customized the background of our template. So it's not just the normal template colored backgrounds. This is all quite straightforward and normal, what you'd expect on a System 1 template, drop downs and tick boxes. But every single background we've customized based on what the service needs. So as you can see, it's just assessments, adding notes, viewing documents, reviewing information, and reviewing past notes. So it's all there, what they need. So I'm just going to cancel that. So all those options, as you saw, I could navigate through the template to see them on there, or I could just click on any of these buttons to go directly to what I need. So the main point of us doing it this way was to make it as easy as possible, make it nice and simple, straightforward, so there wasn't really too much clicking around and navigating into different areas of the system. So you can see here again, come back to the template on the same screen, so on and so on. Review past information. Again, down the bottom, we have additional options. So we've got some protocols involved. This would give additional guidance on whether it's an emergency call or not, and the next steps. So basically, everything they need is on this screen. What I can do then, if I just press save and discard, assuming that I've done some notes, you can now see that the record has actually closed in the background. So then I can then start my next call by registering or searching without even having to navigate away from this screen. So this screen stays on top the entire time and we don't need to leave, which makes it nice and easy for someone who hasn't used EPR before, and for this particular service who've got a high volume of calls potentially coming in, so they don't want to be fiddling around too much. So that's one of the ways that we've used visualizations so far. I'm just going to close this and go to search again and open up a patient record. We've also started embedding visualizations within the patient record. So for some other services. So the normal templates that we have that opened up, as you know, will pop up on the screen and you enter the information that way. With this way, we're actually able to get it embedded on the screen rather than having to go through that method. Again, this works in a very similar way. Customize the background for it and selecting any of these buttons, link to any kind of templates or documents that they need to do. I think in this one, we've also included a user guide, for example, to give additional guidance, which is something that the staff were very, very happy for. So that's a couple examples of how we've been using some of the visualizations. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to show you how we've set up some of the buttons and some of the backgrounds for these visualizations. So if you want to try it yourself, it'll be quite straightforward. So I'm actually going to have this amended version of the Bernardo's dashboard so I can recreate what we've already done, what I've already showed you. As you can see, I've already added some buttons in here for the interest of time, so we don't have to go through everything. But I'm going to be going through the main kind of bits and bobs which we've done. So first things first is that outside of System 1, we would put together a background. So I'm going to add that background in now by selecting the image folder. And I'll put it up at the top here. And I've set the width and height to 1090 and 650. We found that to be the best kind of layout, just for your reference, because then it fits on most staff members' screens. And selecting OK, the image then appears. Now, we've used Photoshop for these backgrounds, but there are plenty of other tools which you can use. I mean, you could probably get away with using Paint, for example, if you really wanted to. But the point is that we customize the background based on what the service actually liked and what they actually needed based on kind of our requirements gathering. Nitesh, you put up your hand?
Sorry to interrupt, Thomas. I think people are not able to see your dashboard when you were editing. So we are still on this. We're still on this page where you have a list of different artifacts. Yeah, so that wasn't showing up.
Okay, what I'll do. Apologies if this is my first time using Zoom. You share. There we go. Can you see that?
Yes.
There we go. Okay, sorry. Just to give you a summary again of what I just said. So this is just an empty version of the Bernardo's dashboard, which I showed you previously. There are some buttons on here already that I put on just for the interest of time. If I right click and go to configure, I could then put on the background. If I select the folder and then go here, I can see the background which I've uploaded previously. And 1090 to 650 is kind of the rough, the best kind of sizing for the background. So selecting OK, the background has then appeared. So as I was mentioning, you can use plenty of different tools to put these backgrounds together. We used Photoshop to put this in place, but there's plenty of other options. And all of this was kind of designed with the usability in mind. So we had plenty of sessions with staff members and potential users and managers of how they want their screen to look and what options they want to have on it. And it was all put in place based on that. So there are some buttons here that you can see already. And I'm going to put some of them on the main kind of functions. So up at the top, these are just quick action buttons. So I can select button and then click on the area where I want it to appear. And I'm just going to add a save button and change the button style to large without text. So I put without text because we've customized our own kind of text on the bottom there. Selecting OK, you can see this white border around it. If I double click, I can just make that transparent. And there we go. So there I have my button on my toolbar. So that's quite quick, quite straightforward. That's also very similar to a lot of these other ones. So these are just kind of template buttons. So if I can go to Leonardo's to add a button, I'm just going to add this. For this one, we chose the small button, just so it fits a bit better in here. What we did find is that using the zooming tool on Windows helps us actually align all these a lot better. So that's a little tip for you. There's also another way that we add buttons. So we saw it on the Molster and Griffiths page and on this one. If I click on title and then just do a space, if I just do any kind of link, just for the time being, create the background transparent, we can make a transparent button. So we don't even need to use the quick action button. So then that covers the entire area. So now that entire section is a button rather than just a small quick action button. So then that's it basically. So that's how we've set these up, done the backgrounds, pressing OK. Let's probably stop sharing my screen now. But essentially, there we go. That's it. And then that's how we set it up. So any questions?
Thank you, Thomas.
Thomas, and thanks Natesh and Doug for that session. It was very, very interesting. We've had a couple of questions in the chat, so I'll just go through and read some of those out. The first question said, when setting up these screens and interfaces, have you found that it's had any effect on data quality?
I'm happy to take a data quality question. The services that this is live with now are amongst our partner organizations, and they've previously had paper. We've seen an improvement in recording. What I will add to that though is our current utilization of System 1. If I say we've got a single unit architecture where all of our operational services sit within that, that's children's services, that's older adults, that's everything. Our ambition and our direction of travel now is to make a multiple unit architecture, like you've seen in some of the other organizations using System 1. And this will sit across, I can't remember now, Natesh, it's about 50 teams.
60 to 70.
Okay, there we go. And that's everything from inpatients through to perinatal psychiatry, through to community mental health. The intention there is to utilize exactly what you've seen in this session, a bespoke build that's designed with the service, that's relevant to be aligned against clinical and operational workflows. The impact will therefore be on data quality. You'll see an improvement. The current challenge we've got with our use of System 1 is because we've implemented it in such an unyielding way, it's difficult to record things. And I don't know if you're all System 1 users, but it's difficult to record things when you've got to kind of go through this Masonic, click this button, flick that switch, and make sure that everything's outcomed and so on and so forth. That's pretty cumbersome. We don't want that to be the user experience. We are seeing deficits with regards to data quality because of the way we've designed things at the moment. Once we start to make this a more bespoke fit, one of the drivers for this work was to improve user experience, which will have an improvement on data quality.
Great, thank you, Doug. Another question we've had come through is, how did you go about identifying the use cases for using visualizations?
use cases as in the
As in using Bernardo's and the National Autistic Society.
So when we came up with these designs and the use of visualizations, we had initial kind of requirements gathering sessions with those services. And it was through those requirements that we put together what the best kind of user stories would be for those users of what their requirements would be. And then with that information in mind, that's how we came to using visualizations.
Yeah, and just to add, so one of the key insights which research informed us was that the Bernardo's and National Autistic Society, who are our partner organizations, their teams were apprehensive and skeptical about using a clinical software solution. They wanted something really simple and really easy to use. They have had heard horror stories about how difficult it is to navigate using a System 1 solution. So the team brainstormed, designers and System 1 configuration experts met, and they came up with the idea of testing and experimenting. So in the last 1 year, we have been doing a lot of experimentation, right? And they came up with the idea of using visualization, and the feedback was really, really positive. And we implemented the look and feel and the design and branding guidelines of these organizations. So for them, the experience was very much similar to using their own product, their own website artifacts. And that was one of the use cases, I would say.
Great, thank you. Had quite a few questions come through. This one's from Debbie. She said, the system looks great. Did you trial different programs to create your background? Because I know you guys use Photoshop, so it'd be interesting to know if you went through different options.
Yeah, and so what I would say is that when we came up with this new architecture or the operating structure of the design teams, and we recruited the designers and design specialists, so typically before going out and buying a software package, we have internal brainstorming session as well, a bit of a user research with our internal stakeholders and the team members as well. We don't impose a software package on them. And most of the teams were really familiar with the Adobe suite, which has been there for a long time. And with the help of our senior management, we were able to procure the budget to get that piece of software package. It is absolutely possible to create backgrounds even in PowerPoint if people are creative, and save it as a JPEG and import it within System 1. But for us at Surrey and Borders, Adobe Suite works best. Teams are more familiar with it. They are really confident, and they're able to create fantastic visualization. So more recently, I've even procured Illustrator because the icon functionality within System 1 is really restricted. So the teams are creating their own icons, and they're using the vector software development package Illustrator to do that.
Great, thank you. This question's from Hayley. She asks, when you've identified an area to do this with, what is the sort of timeline from scoping with the team to launching it, or is it unique to each service?
It's a good question. When we are doing our next bit, our larger rollout, the hope is, in fact, it's more of an expectation, that we'll do some heavy lifting with a couple of services first and then blueprint that. So there will be absolutely a degree of bespoke ability for each service. But when we're looking at multiple units now, off the top of my head, I think it was around 3 months. But we'd expect this time to come down as we design around and become more familiar with the product as well.
Great, thank you. This question, do you still collect everything needed for national data sets, etc., while using these interfaces?
Yeah, you will do. So we're not there with our core services yet. So we couldn't do this if we weren't going to be satisfying things like NHS. Yeah, it's one of the core principles for having an EHR in the first place. So one of the motivators for doing that, though, sorry, Thomas, one of the motivators for doing that is a lot of the stuff that we need to capture for MHSDS is fiddly. So part of the working through this with our clinical staff particularly will be trying to simplify recording processes.
I mean, a lot of what you've seen today is just a different way of entering the same information. It's all linked, it's all coded and everything. So as far as data requirements go, that's always at the kind of the forefront of our thinking when we put this together.
Great, thank you. James asks, do you have use cases involving mobile health workers? And if so, how has this influenced the use of visualizations? I'm not sure if that's something that you guys have looked into, but it'd be interesting to know.
So are you talking about the mobile version of mobile working version of System 1?
Yeah, I'm assuming that's what James said.
So the visualizations aren't, with these kind of backgrounds, they don't really work on that particular version of System 1, unfortunately. So we haven't been able to implement it on that.
Great, thanks, Thomas. Debbie asks, would you expect that the person creating the background has extensive knowledge of Paint Shop, Pro, etc.? As a template designer for System 1, I have no knowledge of these programs or similar packages. It'd be interesting to know.
I don't think you need extensive knowledge on these software packages. If you've never used one of them before, there would be a little bit of training to know the kind of, working out how to basic things like putting the boxes in places and doing backgrounds and doing icons and things. But it's not a huge mountain to climb. It's something which I think anyone can learn rather easily if they have a little bit of training on it.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. And I think it's not just about the software package or a beautiful background. It's more about the usability. It's about making sense of that workflow so that, you don't repeat the same features and functionality on every single page or every single tab. So co-designing and optimizing the workflow so that every feature, every function, every button has got a purpose. And even if you have a simple background, think of Google, that's fine too. It's more about optimizing the functionality and the workflows and making things bigger and bolder, so driving the user experience, because the vanilla version of System 1, the font size is really small. The icons, we've got a limited set there, which is why we are using the photo editing software to make the fonts or the text bigger and bolder, and so that the eye can focus on the exact workflow and making it more user friendly. And again, there are several software packages available which can be used to create simple backgrounds, customized fonts, and again, exporting that background with text into a JPEG or PNG format and importing it in System 1 with those dimensions which Thomas showed us would still work. It doesn't have to be jazzy. Would you agree, Thomas?
Yeah, that's right. We decided to go for jazzy as well as usable.
Yeah.
Great. There's a couple of questions along these same lines. It'd be interesting to know, after you've deployed these interfaces, how do you evaluate and learn afterwards?
So as part of our go lives, as part of our kind of whole design process, we do have post-launch evaluations. So that generally takes place sometime after they have gone live, because obviously with a go live, you are supporting the users as normal, but the post-launch evaluation is using research techniques to go in, gather the honest information that we can get out of them, and potentially make any improvements after the go live has taken place.
Yes, and we need to do more of pre and post launch evaluation and testing, but we have started that process. So we are taking one step at a time, perhaps. So yes, the ideal approach, we'll do the pre and post test, but we have been able to do it on some products, not all, and we need to do more of that.
Hi, Barbara. What we have to be mindful about, I guess, in health IT, if I can put it as crudely as that, is we've got a culture of fire and forget. You get something over the line, it's a project, and then you move on to the next thing. And as clinicians, we'd need to ensure that we evaluate the life cycle of that product. So this is speaking to more of the CREM world, and we need to ensure that we capture the experience, the usability within our workforce. And that's the journey we're on, mindful that we're not going to be overloading folk with questionnaire fatigue or engagement fatigue, but it's not just going to be implemented and then forgotten about, because that wouldn't serve any purpose.
Great, thank you. There's been a couple of questions along the lines of accessibility. In terms of building these interfaces and deploying them, have you found that there's been any issues in terms of accessibility, readability, anything like that?
We actually have a good example of when one of the backgrounds wasn't as accessible as before. So with one of our other services for the National Autistic Society, one of their staff members was actually autistic, and the way that we had kind of set up the background with the color combinations and the text combinations, it was quite difficult for that person to actually see the information on the screen. So we changed our design based on that. Because it is just a background which we are customizing ourselves, we have that flexibility to make it as kind of universally accessible as we possibly can.
Fantastic. It'd be interesting to know, Simon asks, have there been any unpredictable or rather predictable unforeseen consequences, and how have these been tackled? It'd be interesting to know as well, just what have been the challenges generally in terms of this project and implementing it?
I can give you the biggest one from my personal perspective. The biggest headache I've had is when you show people what's possible, everybody wants it now. And the clambering for people who have had different experiences using a product to seeing what you might be able to do has been interesting in terms of prioritizing. So we're going through that now. That's not something that we'd lead from digital. This is something where we need our clinical colleagues to pick up the baton and say, we're triaging it in this way. We've got a bit of a roadmap now currently for going out into our multi-unit program. Can I, whilst I've got the mic, just pick up a couple of other things here? There's some questions here about the technology, which is probably great, and we could field those separately. But I think one of the key takeaways from this presentation isn't necessarily about the product. It's the process of engaging people. So if we think that each design team has got, correct me if I'm wrong, Nitesh, 6 people, I think we might be going to 7.
6 to 7,
yeah. That is a requirement to go in and properly embed yourself. If you heard of terms like Gemba, you want to go and walk in the shoes of the people that are actually doing the work, the clinicians and the operational folk, and they need to believe that the work that you're doing is going to return a value on their overstretched time already. And it is a huge investment. It is ring fencing design team capability to do this engagement that yields this type of work. Otherwise, it's guesswork. You're throwing darts into a board around design, and you risk falling into the same mistakes that we have previously. I just want to, obviously we'll field some technical questions too. I think Andrew's raising one around images as text that I can't personally answer, but I don't know if Thomas or Nitesh can.
Which question was this one, sorry?
Sorry, I've got the chat in front of me. Have you experienced any problems using images as text in the design, as this is something one would normally try to stay clear of when designing digital services, as it can't be read by screen readers?
Oh, no, we haven't come into that issue. Hadn't considered that either, to be honest.
No, yeah, that's right.
There are some quick system-related questions which I think I can answer for some people. There was one question here about how does it appear in the tab journal? So the information appears as normal on the tab journal because all the information is going to be entered on a data entry template. So that appears as you would expect. There's another question around the event details dialog not coming up. That's because I turned it off for the purpose of this demonstration. You can have that on as normal. That's fine. There was another question around, can it be published via organization group? Yes, it can. That's fine. It can be published all across. Visualizations, they don't work with mobile working. That was another question. And there was another question about how the background showed on templates as well. I don't think I've got time to show you, but if you add it as an image and put the image at the back of all the other items which you're layering on top, then you can get the same effect that we've got here with the visualizations. So if you're wondering about the layering of the items on the template, on the left-hand side of the template creation screen, you've got an ordering column as well. So I think that covers most of these questions that have come out.
Great, thanks so much, Thomas. Had a question saying, do you follow any guidelines in terms of accessibility, i.e. people with hidden disabilities such as dyslexia?
So we follow the kind of NHS design principles and our trust's kind of design principles with accessibility in mind. I can't remember which principle it is.
that is correct, Thomas. And I think there are some constraints within the System 1 software package as well. We don't have accessibility evaluation protocols. They are similar to the web portals. So I think people are referring to W3 guidelines there, or AAA guidelines or AA guidelines. Now, we need to remember this is System 1 and not a web portal. And there is a very limited functionality within System 1 with regards to accessibility. So whatever we are able to implement through the design approach by adjusting colors, fonts, text, we are doing that. But obviously there's an opportunity in the future to focus more on the accessibility side of things.
There's also just I think it's WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Yeah. So I think that's worth looking up if you've not seen it. I'm just picking up something specifically that Andrula's raised. Feel free to put your microphone on and ask a question. I don't want to not answer technology questions. It just wasn't the main driver for today.
Yeah, hi Doug, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so what I think it looks really good. The product looks really good. What you've done with it looks really good. So my because again, you know, with the engagement, obviously I've been doing clinical transformation, application development for 12 years. I'm an adult nurse by background, so always, you know, holding that in you know, intention with what needs to be done. So my query was, we do kind of something similar in CNWL with data entry templates and using them as dashboards and that kind of thing, putting in pictures where we need to. So this looks really good. It looks sort of quite snazzy as well. I was just really interested in whether we could have if I could ask you to have a little discussion around comparing the two and using them in that way, if that's possible, please.
Sure. I guess the big differences are that the visualization can be opened outside of a person's record, which means that we can have all the additional we can have it as an overlay for the system rather than the template, which is more based on what's on a person's record and the data that's on there.
Right.
There are additional bits of functionality which the template can do, but the visualization which the visualization can't do, such as being able to have drop downs, kind of note boxes or views embedded within the template. But on the visualization, we found a way around that by just having links to the template, which opens separately. So it's all about how you want your service to run and the functionality for you to use.
Right. So you don't need to be in a patient's record to be recording information and just navigating around different aspects that you've configured.
Yeah, so if I want to open up the visualization first before I go into the person's record, or if I want to register as well, I open up the visualization first. It basically means that we have a separate screen outside of System 1 where the person can access all the data from.
Right, okay, right. Okay, that's great, thank you. And that's kind of the main kind of difference we'd see between the two. I mean, I'm looking forward to having this and having a play, to be honest with you, because you know, it does look really good. And I have a couple of colleagues online within the team as well, and we've got our own like instant message chat going on we all really like what we see when we looking forward to getting our hands on it. So, but in terms of understanding what we can understand today, that's kind of the main difference about being in the patient record.
So again, though, not to understate this, it's not just getting the tool. So, Andrula, if you get the tool and you start designing in separation from your clinical teams as a nurse, doctor, AHP, otherwise, then you're not hiding to nothing.
Nothing we do is ever done without it being driven by the services and fully engaged with them. Nothing ever. It would just be completely inappropriate to do that. So yeah, yeah. And we have very close relationships with them. So, but yeah, that's cool. And because I completely agree. That's absolutely right. That's the only way to do it. Thank you for your time today. That's been really helpful. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks everyone, and thank you all for your questions. Again, thank you so much to Nitesh, Doug and Thomas for presenting today. The session was fantastic. I'm afraid we didn't get around to answering all of the questions, but as I said earlier in the chat, if you would like to direct any more questions towards us or Surrey and Borders, please send them via the email that I put in the chat. I'll put it in again. And again, I just want to say, if any of you have watched this and thought, I produced some really interesting content and I'd be interested in sharing it, please do send me an email because we can look into you presenting a session like this or a case study, whatever it may be. And again, our next session in this series is going to take place on the 23rd of March, and that will be Nottingham and Nottinghamshire CCG presenting their F12 project. So more details will be coming out on that in the next few weeks. So thanks everyone again, and yeah, have a nice day.
Thank you all.
Thanks
Bye for now.